And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Welcome to the Forum, your way to keep up with state and community leaders, experts, and local business leaders. This is your chance to hear from and talk to people that affect your life right here in Rim Country. You can express your opinions by calling 474-2427. And remember, the comments and opinions of guests and callers are not necessarily the opinions of KMOG. Welcome to Rim Country Forum.
And good morning. Thursday edition of the Forum. Charlie Seraphin with you this morning. Thanks to our sponsors, Sunshine Cleaning and Restoration, the Owens Law Firm, Realty Executives Arizona Territory, Pinnacle Propane, Hospitality Wireless, Furry Friends, and Dana Law Group. And we are pleased to welcome, and it's not an April Fool's joke, ladies and gentlemen, we have the new CEO of Banner Payson Medical Center. Good morning, Hoyt.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Hoyt Scapeland is his name. And how long have you been in Payson now?
Been working here since November 16th. Formally moved. We bought a home in Payson and moved in the second week of February.
Okay, so you're a newbie, as we say, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we're going to take you back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born, my father was studying forestry at Utah State University, and I was born there, and then they moved me as a child, an infant, to Montana, to Hungry Horse, Montana. And then,
where is that in Montana?
I think I'm not exactly sure. I think it's...
You don't remember?
I don't have no memory. I see photos of this little diapered baby, and that they tell me it's me. So I trust them. But So a place like Payson, actually, and then moved to Priest River, Idaho, along the British Columbia border, up by Coeur d'Alene, up in that Spokane, Washington area. So when I was 8... we moved. Dad got the dream job, which was Flaming Gorge National Park, where he served as the fire and visitor information officer. In the West Yellowstone National Park fire, my dad was the guy that was interviewing with the news stations across the country to give updates on the fire. So he was a forest firefighter, and he and my mother spent their honeymoon summer working in the high Uinta Ute Lookout Tower, spotting forest fires before satellites were used. And so Payson looks a lot like home to me. I grew up in Flaming Gorge National Park. Wow. Population of 120.
Okay, and so from there, from Flaming Gorge National Park, where'd you go next?
I went to Australia for a few years to serve as a missionary in my church, and loved that. Came home, and my high school sweetheart was still single. There's a long story behind that one. We don't have time for that.
Divine intervention there?
Oh, there was divine intervention. And she said yes after I asked her twice to marry me. And so she did marry me, and we've been married 29 years. Her name is Carmen. She's from southeast Idaho. She was raised on a potato farm and milking cows, and hardworking gal, and a beautiful gal, I might add. We have 2 children that came shortly after. Well, we both studied at Utah State University, and she had a degree in education, secondary education, and I received my degree in accounting with a full intention to become a hospital administrator. It's what I wanted to do, and the hospital administrators I met had told me, you ought to get a degree in accounting, the language of business. So I did, and then we went to the University of Minnesota, and Carmen supported me and followed me, has done that her whole life. And we went to the University of Minnesota and studied healthcare administration and graduate studies and business administration. And then with an answer to prayer, I loved your prayer this morning. Thank you for praying for rain, and my family does the same. And so we an answer to prayer, we were led to New Mexico, where I worked for Presbyterian Healthcare Services for 18 years. And before...
Where in New Mexico?
I started in Albuquerque for 4 years as an intern, and then as a Health Information Management Services Director, an admitting director, an IT director, and then they asked me if I would be the administrator of the hospital in Tucumcari, New Mexico, along Interstate 40 between Albuquerque and Amarillo. Mm-hmm. And then I was asked to transfer to Socorro, New Mexico, south of Albuquerque, about an hour. And then I was asked to transfer to Clovis, New Mexico, on the border near Lubbock, Texas, near Texas Tech University, and lived there 8 years. My boss came to Banner Health, and when we were ready for a change, reached out to him, and he enticed us to come to Banner. Went to Fallon, Nevada, about an hour from Reno, was the administrator of the hospital there. Then was asked if I would transfer to Sterling, Colorado, where I was the CEO of that hospital and asked to oversee 7 other Banner hospitals simultaneously. That proved to be an awful lot, and so a year later, I just became responsible for the rural hospitals in Banner, and Page and Payson, Arizona were moved under me. So Lance Porter and I had a reporting relationship, and I love Lance. He's doing really well, by the way, in Casper, Wyoming. And I fell in love with Payson when I came here twice before as his supervisor. And my wife came with me on one of those trips, and she said, boy, wouldn't it be something to live here? So with the growth of our company in Wyoming, a restructure occurred. And so they transferred me to be responsible for 3 hospitals in the city, which is not my love. They were great hospitals, great staff. My boss saw that after about 9 months, and she said, you don't seem as enthusiastic. I said, it's hard to do that. I love small. And she said, well, did you know that Lance Porter might be transferring to Casper? Would you be interested in Payson? Yes, ma'am.
Divine intervention again.
And then she said, well, we want you to start in 9 days. And she was on November 16th. I said, you mean December 16th? She said, no, November 16th. So within a very short period of time, my wife and I made that decision and started here and haven't looked back. We love it here.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, well, we always do this, but I have to tell you, I've known Hoyt now for all of 12, 14 minutes, I'm going to say. This is a really wonderful human being. He is a really good man. You can look in his eyes, and eyes are the window of the soul, and you see that he is a really good Christian man, and he's going to be a real asset to our community.
Thank you.
We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
No, it's our pleasure. So that's a great story of all the travels and all the places that you've been, and the John Denver line, which I use often, is coming home to a place I'd never been before. And that's kind of what Payson is for a lot of us, isn't it?
What's interesting, I'll share with you, that gave me chills when I learned. So I came here and my cousin called me, my dad's first cousin called me and said, his name's Jimmy. He said, Hoyt, I just got a phone call from my cousin Judith in Payson, Arizona. I said, I didn't even know I had a cousin in Payson. He goes, well, she wants to know who this Hoyt is that was in the newspaper. And so I connected with Judith Harrison, who, her father was my grandfather's younger brother. And they operated a sawmill. My grandfather created a sawmill in northern Utah, and his younger brother Mark brought a sawmill here, the second sawmill in Payson. Milled lumber. He built the Beeline Cafe, that cafe, and he built the Rim Country Inn. He was the builder and original operator of both. And he served as the Chamber of Commerce president in Payson, Arizona, and I never had a clue until I moved here. So I feel like I have a lot to live up to. And what's even more fascinating, Charlie, was he was the Chamber of Commerce president when the clinic of Payson, the first healthcare, was established at the campus of the hospital is today. He was on the chamber board and the president at that time. And the newspaper headline that day about the clinic board making the decision to build the clinic, he was featured on that paper. And so I have to be careful where I walk, make sure I live up to this and I don't screw this up. Just saying, I want to make sure to carry on that heritage and that vision.
There's a lot of Mormon history in this part of the world too, right?
And my understanding is, I as we were driving from Colorado several times during our move, we drove past St. John's, and then you go through Holbrook and up to Heber, and so yes, there is. And I hadn't been familiar with it, but I've become more familiar with it. Certainly, Mesa, Gilbert, Arizona, that section of the state was heavily settled by Mormon pioneers in the early days, and so much of the West. There's a little bit of Mormon history here and there, and grateful to be here. I have a little personal history too, and people here have been so welcoming. The staff of the hospital are unbelievable. I've often inherited hospitals that need a turnaround. That is not the case here. We have some fine-tuning to do. We're trying to become more affordable. That's hard to do in U.S. healthcare today, but we have lowered our prices several times, which is just, you don't do that in healthcare, but we do because we inherited a pretty high price structure. here, very high price structure, and we lowered it thinking it would be enough, and it wasn't quite enough. If you're not careful, the way health insurance contracts work, you could actually bankrupt yourself very quickly. You do $1 million industry and you start making fine tweaks, you could actually overdo and really, really hurt your long-term success. So I've been somewhat cautious in that, and we understand healthcare is so unaffordable today for all of us, and we're anxious to be a solution to that. Banner Health has made some real strides in reducing unnecessary care that's been in the industry. I still would say, I know others to disagree with this, U.S. healthcare is the best in the world. Yes, it's expensive. That's our weakness. However, people in this country don't go without care. If you come to our ER, we do not differentiate in how we care for you based on your insurance or otherwise. That's a real challenge. Good thing we don't buy healthcare the way we buy groceries. I mean, or reverse. Good thing we don't buy groceries the way we buy healthcare. Can you have eggs? Oh, you got to get a prior authorization before you can buy eggs. Is your deductible on the milk? It's crazy how hard it is to buy healthcare. It's complicated, it's expensive. I'm looking forward in my lifetime to see that resolved somewhat. And another thing about healthcare expense in this world, in America, we appreciate our freedom and our individual choice. And if you look at our healthcare conditions, which is how they measure if healthcare is good or bad, I think it's a reflection of our choices. We are proud to be free and to exercise choice, and a lot of healthcare conditions can be impacted by our choices. And so, proud to be an American. I know there's been a lot of contention in this world in the last couple of years, and I'm still proud of the heritage that we have and the ability to be able to speak our opinions and to be free and to pray on a radio station. That can't happen in every country, and I'm grateful to be here. Helpful. I'm anxious to make healthcare better and to tell the story of what's going well in healthcare in this community, and to bring more healthcare here that we can do at the same quality you can get elsewhere. We're not going to do brain surgery. We're not going to do heart surgery. We're too small. It would be unaffordable, and we couldn't do it well here. But those things that we can do well here, our intentions are, if it's sustainable, we want to bring it here. And I can tell you more about some of those services that we're exploring and bringing and have brought. But
one of the things that I'd like to get into, if we can, is the impact of this situation that we've gone through with COVID, the federal government's intervention in healthcare. And as an accountant, I'm really excited that you're going to be able to give us some of the answers. 18 minutes after 9 o'clock, you're listening to the Rim Country Forum here on KMOG in Payson and KMOGcountry.com around the world. And if you have questions or comments for Hoyt this morning and talking about Banner Healthcare, we welcome your questions or comments at 474-2427. It's the Rim Country Forum on KMOG. Charlie Seraphin with you, along with Hoyt Scabelin, who is the CEO at Banner Payson Healthcare. Is that the correct name?
I'm specifically responsible for the medical center.
For the medical
center.
But
Banner has a footprint here. We have Banner Home Health Care, or Home Care. We have Banner Urgent Care, Banner Medical Group. I'm not directly over those services, but closely tied to them. So Banner Payson Medical Center is my responsibility.
Okay. So at the Banner Payson Medical Center, we've just been through something that no one experienced before. You had no practice for it. They didn't teach you about it when you went to grad school and you're getting your degrees. And so here you are. We have a pandemic, and we have an infusion of federal dollars, but I'm sure with a lot of strings attached. So can you give us a kind of an overview of when you walked in the door, and then it pretty much it's been ongoing, and it's there, and we hear about billions of dollars that Banner as a corporation has received from the federal government. How do you work that out?
That's a great question. Let me first say our hearts go out to those who have lost their lives. Our nurses, our physicians, our nurse practitioners, PAs, respiratory therapists, etc. As we talk, we've never seen anything as humbling in our lifetime and our careers, and hope to never see it again, something of this magnitude. To see some people contract the virus, the COVID-19 virus, and not even realize they carry it, while others, it takes their life. What was hard when this all began, I was in Colorado when it began, and Colorado had its surge before Arizona. And we were the first banner facility in the 6 states we operate in to have the massive impact. So we were kind of the cutting edge of our experience. Very humbling. What was hardest initially was there were groups of people who believed it was a hoax. It became very political very early. And we, those of us our staff that were at the bedside and walking the ICU in this large hospital, we converted many units for ICU care, ventilator care. I felt like I was on a movie. I felt like it was a movie set. It wasn't real. People in their 20s, a few 20-year-olds, I'm 51, people younger than me, really struggling. And that was very humbling. And then to hear that some didn't believe it was real, and when we knew it for sure it was real, made it really hard.
Okay, we're gonna stay with that, but let's go to the phone. Say good morning to our first caller this morning. Welcome to the forum. Who's on the line?
Good morning. This is Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, I have a question for him. A lot of people don't want to take this shot because they think it might be harmful to them, or they don't believe in it, or they don't believe in this virus. What do you do when your nurses don't want to take this shot? And they could be transmitting it to patients and other people. And they say the first people that actually started transmitting this in the hospital was the janitors and stuff that had to clean up the... Hello?
Yeah, I got a call real quick.
Okay, hold on. I got to come back.
All right. Let's deal with the first part of this question. What do you do with employees at the hospital who choose not to be vaccinated?
We've to this point, knowing that the virus is as new as it is, we're waiting on the science behind it to take the same action that has been taken in the past, which is in the influenza virus. We require staff to receive it unless they have the ability to opt out for clinical reasons or potentially a religious reason. With the COVID vaccine, it's been so fast, it's just all new, not as much concrete evidence, you could say, although there is evidence, it's not concrete. So today, staff have the choice to be vaccinated or not. We encourage vaccination, we facilitated it in every way we can. I would imagine that it's possible that in the years ahead it could become required once there's indisputable science behind it. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. So and there are 1,000 questions. We could do 3 hours on just COVID and scratch the surface. But let's talk about the economics of it again. So
Yes.
So how do we, as an administrator, how do you take the resources that are funneled through to you from the federal government and apply them to the people who need it most?
So in terms of the financial impact of COVID to hospitals, it was the funding that has been offered to hospitals has transpired. It's now historic. There's no current funding for hospitals continuing, even though you saw President Biden had signed a bill passed by both the House and the Senate. There was some language apparently in there for rural hospitals. So it's possible that Banner Payson Medical Center as a rural hospital will qualify for additional funding. But Banner has received, the intention was, one, to help, of course, with direct COVID expense, buying additional ventilators. I mean, when you double the size of an ICU, triple, quadruple, incredibly expensive. The other piece was, in some ways, it was fortunate that as COVID rolled out across the country, that it hit different aspects of the country, because that allowed nurses to travel. Does that make sense? We call them nurse travelers or agency nurses. These are rental nurses, so to speak, hotspot nurses. And so that's a great expense when you increase your staffing well above what you're accustomed to having. Or if you have staff that are out sick, you have to backfill them. And so there's a great cost to that. So the federal dollars were intended to help with that expense, the cost. The medications very expensive. All of the I can't even pronounce it. There's one of the monoclonal IV therapies that were developed, and all of this came at great expense. But the most concerning expense to hospitals across the country was the absence of patients. So you say, well, what are you talking about? Well, the ER volumes were cut by 2/3. So people were no longer coming to the ER. People were staying at home. They weren't getting sick from socializing with one another. Whatever the reasons, ER volume dried up. People were afraid of hospitals, afraid to come to the hospital, thought they would contract COVID. So the ER volume was way down. Surgeries were canceled. All of these were precautions. Many of these were intentional precautions, and other response was reaction by patients and community members out of fear or of lack of information. So hospital volumes plummeted, yet we were strained, focused on those that had COVID, which high intensity care, and we were cohorting. We were donning and doffing protective equipment. It's very time consuming. It's very tiresome. So in the end, hospitals have lost millions and millions of dollars, and you use the term billions. I've been focused on Banner Payson, less on the whole of Banner. But those monies, we have not hit target, budgeted levels by any stretch. We're grateful for those funds, which I hope keep hospitals afloat in this country. Right now, there are no further funds expected in Banner outside of the potential of rural hospitals.
Which we would qualify for if
Yes.
that money does come through.
If the criteria upon which they're based, if we qualify. I don't know enough to know is it number of COVID patients. Fortunately today, we have had knock on wood, I hate to even say it, the last 2 to 3 weeks we've had but only a handful of patients admitted for overnight stays with COVID.
No. Hang up and then dial.
Hang up and then dial again. So something's going on with that.
I hope that answered.
Yeah, let's ask
question.
specifically. Let's say self-insured or a person without traditional insurance
Yes.
Comes in and is a COVID patient. Is there relief for them through any of this process?
I have not heard of any of the funding getting that specific to say that its intent was to help the uninsured or underinsured. Because there's so many other legislative arms and tools that are intended to help those that are uninsured, the expansion of Medicaid, et cetera, et cetera. But within Banner Health, as a not-for-profit, we have aggressive charity policies, discounts for those that based on insurance, or it all comes down to income level. If you're at the poverty level, below it, percentage of federal poverty limit, there's consistent application of those guidelines, and we give away millions and millions of dollars worth of care per year.
Let's try again. Welcome to the forum. Who's on the line? Good morning. Hello? No, they would choose not to. Is urban myth or fact that there was, and it sounds really bad to say it this way, but I don't know another way to say it, that there was an incentive for the hospital when it reported the death of a COVID patient, that there were some funds that were tied specifically to COVID treatment?
I would say myth. However, if that is, I don't believe that's ever been discussed. We've never been asked for that level of detail. There's reporting that includes death, diagnoses, number of positive tests per day, negative tests. It was all science. For us, it was the science of medicine. There was never, and that's why I'm proud to work for Banner Health, and I'm proud to be in the not-for-profit sector of healthcare. I've never worked for the for-profit side. I'm a fan of the free enterprise system. I'm a fan of profit. Don't get me wrong.
Capitalism. You're a capitalist.
I'm a capitalist.
Okay.
But in healthcare, that can get carried away. And I'm proud to work for a company, and I've only worked for companies that are structured this way. I have never felt influenced by the financial means of a patient, or to qualify to gain payment at the patient's expense. Never. So I'd be shocked if that has any truth to it, other than not at all shocked to know that hospitals have to report deaths and that payments required that hospitals fully report. So that's probably what's happened here is people see that there's a list of 50 things you have to report, and one of them is patient's death. And if you don't report that, you don't get paid. Now one ratio that was, and I think appropriate, if I were a legislator, it would be appropriate, is hospitals that had a high number of COVID patients they were treating received higher support payments. And all these payments were made in arrears. And then at one point, the government paid them in advance because cash flow was becoming a problem across the country for hospitals to pay salaries, etc., pay wages. So they paid them in advance, and then they had take-backs or additional payments made to hospitals based on their COVID prevalence. I've never heard any reference to death. And in fact, I would argue that a hospital should be motivated to keep people alive. So why would, you know what I mean? I think that's a myth.
So when you talk about Payson Banner as a part of a larger nonprofit system, how do they incentivize a CEO? Because CEOs are generally incentivized by profit.
So we have a balanced scorecard. So when my salary is developed, it's based on market-based compensation, and then Banner takes a significant portion of it and puts it at risk. And then across that balanced scorecard, which is the same scorecard that our board of directors receives and holds senior management at the highest level of the company to that which we report to our employees, down to our housekeepers, to all the staff. We start with patient safety, which is the clinical outcomes. How effectively are we applying evidence-based practice to provide the best and most effective care possible? There's a series of indicators, and I'm very proud to tell you that Banner Payson Medical Center, under the leadership of Dr. Cynthia Booth as our Chief Medical Officer, and Laura Ryden, our Chief Nursing Officer, and a team of many, has achieved some of the best results within Banner, within things like hospital-acquired pneumonia, surgical site infection, the list goes on. So that's one of the most important quadrants of the indicators. So our performance,
like MRSA and some of those things.
MRSA has become less of that. It's more common, but yes, infection-related. Anything about what can we influence and prevent, or ensure. So that's an example of one of the indicators that. So I have a portion of my salary is tied to our performance on that, and of course the measures and indicators are such that I can't manipulate them. It's really a very fair measure. The second is patient's experience. You might receive excellent clinical care, but most of us can't really judge that. You know, how effectively was the appendectomy performed clinically? But you can judge how good the food tasted or didn't, how kind the staff were, did they make eye contact, were they genuine, did they really give you updates, did the doctor and the nurse, were they on the same page, those kind of things. That's customer experience, patient satisfaction. And so a good portion, that's a second quartile of our performance. A third is our employees, the people that we engage in this work, physicians, medical staff, volunteers. We are so proud of the volunteers that volunteer at the hospital, and now we've gotten permission to bring them back under certain conditions, and so you'll see the volunteers helping us again. Those volunteers are so important. They give of themselves. And then our employees. How are we treating them? Is it a great place to work? Are their opinions considered and involved? Are they involved in decisions that affect them, etc.? So that's a quartile. And then there is the quartile. If you don't pay the bills, here at the station, you have to pay the bills. We have to make sure we balance our budget. And so a quarter of my at-risk salary is tied to the financial performance of the hospital, we call it contribution margin. How much is left over to be able to reinvest in the hospital? We don't pay Wall Street. We have bonds. Banner has bonds like most businesses do. We have to pay interest on those. We want to make sure we're performing well financially so we can have access to debt at reasonable interest rates. But we don't have shareholders we have to pay. So our whole purpose is to expand our influence to make healthcare better so life can be easier.
What happens when you have and you try hard, but every once in a while something falls through the cracks, some staff member has a bad day, or a couple of them have a bad day, and you have a bad patient experience. Yeah. How do you, given the fact that that's an incentive, it would be really comfortable to sweep that under the rug and say, we're just going to, we'll forget about that, try to do better next time. How do you deal with a bad patient experience?
Let me first say this. I do think that we all have a sixth sense. You kind of referenced that in your compliment of me, and I appreciate it. I hope to live up to that compliment. I think many of us, if Christians, would call it a spirit, a feeling. You can tell. People know if you're being genuine, I think. There's some masterful manipulators that somehow find out how to try to mirror that, mimic that, but there's some way that I think we can be true and know. And so I'm grateful that healthcare at large, on the whole, attracts people who really want to care for each other effectively. I don't know of any healthcare worker in the country, except for some who are in prison, who intentionally make an error. Follow me? And I don't know of any of our staff or any service industry in Payson in the region who intentionally want to disappoint a customer. So I'm grateful to start with an ingredient of altruistically motivated people. So for me, when these errors occur, although I have that incentive, I don't need that incentive. I'll just tell you that. Does it provide focus? I suppose it does. I reflect on it, and I have to measure it because I have to convey it to others that way. I would hope that if I ran this hospital as a private entity and I owned it, I would act no differently under whatever incentives. But incentives are a reward system. I get that. And it's a really competitive industry. If you don't reward people for good behavior and they don't feel happy and rewarded, they'll vote with their feet and go elsewhere. So back to your question. We have great processes. We have what we call a just culture. If you make an error, we don't want you to be afraid for that error to be known. Although you already are embarrassed, no one's more disappointed than you are. So we have a process that recognizes that and says, we want to make it safe to talk about this. And then we study it. We want to know what contributed to the error or the disappointment of the patient. We were talking about room temperature. It's one of the hardest things. I give employee forums for the last 25 years, every 3 to 4 months, groups of 30 to 40, some in larger settings 70. And I've learned that the perfect temperature for a group setting room to get the equal number that say it's too hot and the equal number that say it's too cold, at least in healthcare, I don't know if it's because what they're wearing, 70 degrees. If it's 71, I have the majority think it's too hot. If it's 69, the majority think it's too cold. So my point being is there's always something that could contribute to a patient's experience being poor, and it's not often one person. It's usually systems and processes. So we want to study that and learn. We have a sophisticated system that we track all disappointments. Clinical error is we have the most sophistication around it. Yep. And so I don't know if that addresses your question, but I hope I'm going to face my maker one day, and he's not going to ask me, hey, what rank were you? He's going to ask me, how true were you to the role you had? And I feel my role is to support the medical staff and the employees and the community, to be a good corporate citizen, to recruit and train the best leaders possible who also share the same value. And you do that and people will stay. Number one reason people leave their job is not the money. It's the relationship with their supervisor. That doesn't mean they're having coffee every day and they're hanging out at their house. Do they feel valued and respected and heard? Do we agree? Can we disagree agreeably? That's the kind of relationship we need. So that's one of my favorite things in leadership, and I'm really excited about the team that I've inherited. And I feel like with increased communication, transparency, this will sound crazy, and some people say, yeah, this guy's crazy, but I feel we have the components to create one of the highest performing hospitals in the state of Arizona, and at least in the top 10% in the country. And Banner has many of those types of hospitals, and we're smaller. And I think that's an advantage. We're smaller. I'm going to face you at Walmart, at Safeway, at Bashas'. I'm going to face you at True Value or at Aces. I'm going to be seeing you in the community. That's a high level of accountability, and I signed up for that. That's what I came back to that. I've been in the larger city where they don't even know if I showed up to work that day. Here, we may be a small pond, but one pebble can be rippled through the whole pond, and so we're going to do great things here, and we already are. Our overnight stay patients are called inpatients. Our current inpatient satisfaction is some of the highest. Well, it is the highest in our measured history. We have great leadership, great team assembled. The emergency department's been challenging because when you come to the ER under COVID constraints, you could not have a visitor with you for the safety of you, your guest, and others. We couldn't have that. Now we're back to allowing visitors. That did not create satisfaction. So I'm grateful that I'm hoping we're past that, hoping these new strains of COVID don't take us back in a backswing. We're doing everything we can with Gila County and Ponderosa Family Care Clinic and others, and the MHA Foundation and the community to get people vaccinated who are willing and who do that. We've gotten one of the best vaccination rates in the entire country. We were one of the first counties in the entire country to begin vaccinating 18 and older. As a result, from one of the highest penetrations of COVID in the state of Arizona, we are now. I saw the positivity rate in the report from Gila County yesterday. Cumulative rate was it was below 3%. Unbelievable operation. One of the most sacred moments since I've been here, other than visiting the floors, visiting the patient, the nurses during the peak of COVID, was going to one of our first COVID vaccination clinics and serving as the greeter to take temperatures and help orient. This was the over 75 group. That was sacred. These people, no one was late. They were all on time or early. World War II veterans. It was one of the most sacred experiences in my life.
Hoyt Scablin, who is the CEO at Banner here in Payson. It's 16 minutes until 10 o'clock. You're listening to the Rim Country Forum. We'll have more after this. If you'd like to join the conversation, 474-2427. A fascinating discussion with Hoyt Scablin, who is the CEO at Payson Banner Payson Medical Center. Banner Payson Medical Center. I should have written it down a little more accurately. So what are some of the other things that you're excited about? We've talked about COVID a lot, and we've talked about incentives and the financials and that sort of thing, but what are some of the things that people in Payson can take advantage of that they might not have if they lived in another community?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would just share a few recent developments that have been, nothing happens overnight, especially in healthcare. One has said that, there's a study that said that the most complicated industry in the world is United States healthcare, and I think you'd all say, yeah, I can see that. In the hospital itself, there's over 30 industries. If you have imaging, within imaging, you have plain film X-ray, then you have fluoroscopy, mammography, CT, nuke med, just super complicated. So to bring a new service to town is not something that's a matter of willpower alone. It takes a lot of planning and exploration. You want to make sure to bring something that's sustainable. So an example of that, Dr. Neely is an orthopedic surgeon who lives in Mesa, and he's fellowship trained. That means additional formal training in shoulders and elbows. So he's a regular orthopedic surgeon, and he has these types of sports medicine. He can do knees and those kind of things. Dr. Tawney is our resident. He lives here in Payson. He's our orthopedic surgeon, practiced in the Valley for many years. He's amazing. We are blessed to have him in Payson. So he's here and lives here and has his practice here all month long. But Dr. Neely is coming now once a month. His first week that he came, he had a full clinic. My wife was actually one of his patients. And he's conducted 2 surgeries already, and he'll be doing surgeries here. It provides a chance to save someone having to drive the 3-hour round trip. And then on the day of surgery, you can come an hour and a half later, so to speak. They don't have that travel. And then you can go home, and it's less disruptive to the family. So that's an example of bringing a very safe, His surgeries are just as high quality here as they would be performed in a Banner facility in the Valley. Excited about Dr. Neely. Super engaging. Was actually a high school, college athlete, played football, got a knee injury and decided to help heal injuries. And so Dr. Neely, shoulders, elbows, and other orthopedics. So that's a new development. Two other programs that I'd like to talk about if there's time. One is cardiopulmonary rehab. So when a patient has, let's say, I'll use the most extreme, has open heart surgery, unbelievable that we can do that today, that we live on a time and era where that knowledge we've been blessed with. You crack open that person's chest, you repair arteries, connect arteries, then you bring it back together. We give them a pillow because when you don't want to laugh after that surgery, you don't want to cough, you don't want to get a cold after that surgery. It's life-changing. Walking from the car into the store becomes a traumatic event. And being able to rebuild, you and I think about, I want to lose a few pounds, so we want to get on the treadmill. After that surgery, that's just intimidating. So cardiopulmonary rehab is for those that cardiac rehabilitation or people that have COPD or breathing issues. How do we help them rehab? It's the equivalent of how do we lose a few pounds? In this case, it's how do we restore the activities of daily living so we can live the next 10 years of our life happily with quality of life. This is what this program does. It's guided by Dr. Judy Hunt is the medical director of this program. We partner with Diamond Health. It's a national company. They're outstanding. And we incorporate, one of the uniquenesses of this program, we incorporate behavioral health therapy. Some programs, we just kind of, we know you're struggling emotionally, but we don't talk, we just help you through it. We love you through it. Our program, we actually include in the treatment plan a visit with the therapist who actually, you might say, well, I'm not mentally ill. No, but you're emotionally challenged at that time. And we talk about what's been the hardest thing since your heart surgery. Well, let's talk about that. And so what happens is patients show up for their appointments. They're more compliant with their treatment plan. Some of the best clinical outcomes in the country come through this program by its design. And we get people back up on their feet sooner. They have a better quality of life. That program has opened in October in the shadow of COVID, which limited the number of patients we could treat. But we're excited about that opportunity for the
starting to come forward now more and more, and I would assume, well, everybody listening this morning is now aware of it. But beyond that, I think that the physicians in Payson, particularly those who specialize in heart disease and that sort of thing, are aware of the local program.
We hope that those who go to the Valley because none of these surgeries are done here, of course, but those that are eligible for that program, your doctor in the Valley may not be aware. And so you might say, could I be referred for cardiac or pulmonary rehab at my hometown? It's more convenient. That's what we brought. And there's one other program if there's time. And
sure.
We're renaming this program.
Okay.
And so we asked our employees to help us. We have 18 different nominated names, so I don't have one to announce with you, but it's essentially a program. The Medicare term is geriatric structured outpatient program. You're like, what is that? One of the highest underdiagnosed conditions in those over 65 is depression, clinical depression. We don't talk a lot about it. I find that the most experienced members of our society are the toughest, so they don't talk about it. And as a result, we have people who have lost their spouse, had a child die before them, or have had major changes in their physical health condition, and now they can't do the things as much as they used to do that they loved. And they're struggling to adjust, and they become discouraged to a point that they withdraw from normal activities. And they become reclusive. The family starts to notice it.
Exasperated by COVID.
And I would tell you, so this program we opened in October, and now that COVID is beginning to subside, we are seeing large numbers of self-referred patients come. This program I've worked with for 18 years. It is a program, we actually use a van to help pick people up if they need a ride. And that's part of the program, because when you're depressed, you're not likely to come. So we found that with a van, you can pick them up. It helps bring the most vulnerable in. We have amazing therapists. We have psychiatrists by tele. So it's televideo. We've been using this for many years before COVID on this side. Because sometimes there is a chemical. Sometimes there's a slight medication that can help get someone back on their feet. And then there's the socialization. And this is a 2 to 6 week program, 2 to 3 days a week. You might say that just sounds a little odd. It is effective. It changes lives. It restores people's ability to be happy. There's a lot of other factors. You can't create happiness in healthcare, right? That's a choice, but there are sometimes some things that are obstacles that we need help over to be able to make it easy to choose a happier path. And sometimes it's not a choice. Sometimes it's a disease, and there can be some severe mental health where you do need some medication assistance. And so it's a self-referred program. We've promoted
What
this.
if it isn't self-referred? If let's say your neighbor, you've seen your neighbor used to be pretty upbeat, some things happened, all of a sudden you don't see your neighbor hardly ever, and when you do, it's a kind of a glance at the ground and back in the house. So
that's a tough one.
What is there anything that we can do as a community to help get people referred into the program who obviously need the help but may not be self-referred?
So the patient has to be willing, and that becomes particularly challenging with behavioral health. And I hesitate. We've struggled as a society with mental illness. My grandfather was mentally ill, and my family didn't talk about it because they were embarrassed. It was something I saw as something was bad. And so I think we're coming a lot through COVID. I think one of the benefits of COVID is we're able to realize we're all stressed out. We're all tired of wearing masks. We're all tired of whatever it is, and it's impacting our lives. Our kids need to interact. We missed going to church. We need to be together, strengthen each other. And so I hope we're able to talk about mental illness. I'll make a biblical comment because the Bible is a historical novel at a minimum, right? But the Savior, when he walked the earth, he often talked about visiting those cutting themselves with stones, and a man who was I think there's been mental illness on this planet since Adam and Eve were here. And I don't think we should be embarrassed about it. I think we need to be able to talk about it. So I think talking about it with our neighbor, being aware of this program, physicians refer patients to this program, family are the key. Family often say, something's not right with mom. And they learn about this program, and they help bring mom in for an assessment or evaluation. It's to make it okay and to talk about it in a second nature. They have lunch together. They do group therapy together. It's really just talking. We use these fancy healthcare terms, therapy, behavioral health, disease, and I think we all get intimidated. It's all about being a human being and needing a chance to talk about
When you were
things.
talking about naming it, and you start out with the geriatric outpatient therapy or whatever that phrase was that you used, I went, well, that's kind of, but now I can see why you need another name. You need a name that's less intimidating to those people who would come in and
You'll hear it soon, and we'll be buying an ad to make sure that you promote that for us.
Awesome. All right. We've got about 3 minutes left on the program today, and I do this wrong too regularly, but I was going to start with the other stuff and then get to the happy stuff. This is actually the last subject. I think is a happy subject because there is a lot of potential for really serving the needs of the community through that type of program. But when you talked about the complexity of healthcare in America, and it's one of the most complex industries because there's so many facets, you talked about it from your perspective and looking at, you have all these different types of technologies and practices and therapies, but most of us on the outside, laymen, we think that the biggest problem is the insurance industry. The insurance industry is just really jacked up. I can't find a better phrase. When we were younger, you paid the doctor, you went to the doctor, you paid the hospital, you went to, and sometimes you needed help, but it was always there, and we seemed to get along just fine. Now we have these multi-billion-dollar industry of insurance, trillion-dollar industry, where they're running commercials all the time on television telling you about how their plan is better than somebody else's plan, and that's not cheap. They're spending millions and millions of dollars, and yet your costs for the patient, the end user, are astronomical compared to what they could or should be. So is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
I think now I'll just speak as a human being here and say we always overestimate the amount of change that will occur in a year, and we always underestimate the amount of change in 10 years. Right. I think we're seeing massive change. You're seeing you can dial a doc online, for $40, and I think we will see massive change. Banner is intentionally we're trying to reinvent ourselves. It's very painful to completely reinvent yourself so that you're not Blockbuster videos. Some of us remember Blockbuster video. It's a big deal, and they're gone. They don't exist anymore. Healthcare needs to reinvent itself. I think it already is. There's a lot of investors in the free market capital society that are helping drive that, which I think is a good thing. I think value-based care is where we're going. The problem is most of us will be healthy for a long time and will only once in our life have a major incident. So we feel, why should I pay a lot? So the insurance concept plays a role of accumulating funds to then, it's like life insurance, same kind of concept, right? So somewhere in between, there's the right solution. I think that the key, for me, at Banner Pace Medical Center, we're going to deliver the best quality of care possible and try to become more affordable. So we're prepared to be a long-term player in value-based care, which is something that I don't know what insurance role will be in that, but we all know there's a way to do this better, and it's so complex. I went into this industry to fix that. I've set that aside, and I've decided to fix what I can control. But back in the 90s, when I went to school for the first time to pursue healthcare, that I was so frustrated by the healthcare complexity and the cost. It's far more complicated than I ever imagined, and I don't know that I have the means to solve it. So who we vote for matters, and being prayerful matters, and then look after your own and look after yourself, and then call me if you ever need me at the hospital. Call and ask for an administrator. There's always an administrator on call. We don't want to disappoint you. We recognize that we likely will without intention. We want to get better, and we're grateful for this chance to talk to you.
Hoyt Scablin, thank you for our great visit. Welcome to Payson. Welcome to our community. Thank you for being here. I know that you're going to make a difference, and we can hear that through your comments and your sincerity. And as you said, it's pretty easy to feel that when people are sincere and they're caring, and God put you in the right place at the right time. So
thank you.
Thanks for being here.
God bless you.
Thanks to our sponsors, Sunshine Cleaning and Restoration, the Owens Law Firm, Realty Executives Arizona Territory, Pinnacle Propane, Hospitality Wireless, Furry Friends, and the Dana Law Group. Until tomorrow morning, Deborah Rose is in for a visit tomorrow morning, so you'll be sure to hear that at 9 o'clock. This is KMOG Payson. It's 10 o'clock. 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 It's 10 o'clock.